I've been working on this Turtle Ninja diorama over the last 2 videos, and I've just been sent the 3rd character to go into the diorama, Donnie. This is Groundeffected, my name is your dad, and today I'm gonna start the video at the very beginning.
On my feet, turtle shell on my back. I'm the master of the rap game. No one can attack. Paint a Leo and rap, bringing the 90s back. Skateboard flow, I'm the best. That's a fact. Cowabunga dudes, kicking it with the crew. Got me street.
What you may not have noticed is that I have a little bit of clear resin that's left in this printer, so I've printed some of the smoky things out of the clear, and that might, I don't know, I might dislike that later on, but I thought while I had it in there, I might as well print that. Annoyingly, I thought I might have not got enough for the sign that is on the base. If I have enough left over, I'll try print the sign, but the sign looks pretty large. For now, I have to let them print while I go and support the rest of the plates that need to be printed to finish this model. Nobody likes supporting things. I specifically don't like supporting things, but there's nothing you can do. If you are still learning about supporting, then I don't really know what to say to you. But for me, the best thing was to change to lychee. If you're struggling in one, try the other. There is loads of different ones out there, but specifically I prefer lychee, and it's done away for that better. It's been good for me. The only thing that hasn't been good for me so far is my computer, because these laptops just don't seem to be cutting it anymore. If there's anyone who has a computer computer company, not all computers are equal in this situation. So if you're struggling, it might be your computer, and it's time to increase the graphics. If you're still new to supporting and you're struggling and you're still not quite sure how to go about doing this, basically just get your orientation right, and then in lychee you got this painting thing, and then I just friggin' go like this all over the place and paint the supports everywhere, and Bob is in fact then my uncle, and then I'm literally just gonna friggin' like, I'm obviously gonna pay attention to these important ones here, because these are the ones that's gonna be all wonky donkey if I don't, but the rest of it, and the result is a little bit outrageous, but don't worry about it, because 9 times out of 10 it will be fine. Now that everything is in the printers, or at least some of it is in the printers, I have nothing left to do but wait for print to be done. I'm gonna go home and edit some stuff, and I'll come back tomorrow and see whether there is a mess or some models. I just got into the studio and I can't wait to see what the prints have come out like. After yesterday I had a bit of a catastrophe. I was a little bit worried because I came in and saw I had not put enough resin in my vat, but it is just looking like it's the key, so I think I can work with this. And now, as I have this challenging thing called time, I recruited one of my other very expertise printers to the mix. This is the Frozen Sonic Mighty 8K, and she did a very good job of helping me to get the parts out that I need to complete this video today. Let's get these out, and then I'll take you back to the bench as soon as I've got them prepared. So the next part of the process is now to get all these parts dried, because I can't paint on top of this wetness. And once I've got everything cured and ready to be put together, I'm gonna glue some of the parts together, particularly on the base, so that I can figure out whether I need to fill gaps. I'm gonna start out painting the little smoky things that go around the base, and to do that I'm gonna use this bluey greyish color, which is a contrast paint, meaning it is slightly transparent. Well, at least this one is, because contrasts are a little bit confusing, but let's not get too involved in the chemistry of contrast paints. Speaking of chemistry, there is something in the bricks that need to make them look red, and the chemistry of this lovely red leather and mixing it with this dark dark Caribou Crimson shade makes it look so nice when it dries. And now I need to paint the top of the base, and this is some form of a building, and in my mind this means it needs to be concrete. And so I painted it with the best concrete color that I know of, grey. Once I was done with that, I then moved my attention to the bottom portion of the base, and I then filled in everything over that got oversprayed with black, because I need to use the same concrete color over the top of this. And I'm just going to do this because I don't care about overspray, because overspray is for the weak. You just spray your freaking model and don't worry about it. One day you'll make a mistake and you'll be sad, but when that day happens, we will deal with it then. Speaking of being sad, you will be sad if you don't add more color to your concrete, because grey concrete on its own is rather boring, I must say. So I take Drakenhof Nightshade and I spray that into all the dark and shadowed areas of my concrete. I then use the same color that I initially used to paint the actual concrete, and I dry brush that over all the edges. I also come back with a little bit of a lighter version of that, meaning deck tan. Those that are playing the deck tan game can start now. Once I was done giving those a nice edge highlight, I then glued the top to the bottom of the base. Now I need to start adding a little bit more detail to the pipes that are on the base that I had painted black earlier. And the reason I had painted them black is because if you just dry brush a metallic silver over the top of black, you look like you can know what you're talking about. Let's just put it that way. Basically, all the black stays into the crevasses, and the lovely shininess stays on top, making it look nice and shiny. There is a air conditioner attached to this base, and I wanted to make this look super weathered. I have never really dabbled in the weathering of this kind before, and I figured what I'll do is just keep padding it with a sponge, and I did that until it kind of made sort of a base coat over the top of it. I then took some darker paint and I painted that again with the sponge back on top of it, leaving that to dry. I then dry brushed using the black and metallic technique on the fan part in the front. I then came back and painted some black parts on it because I felt like it was just all too much of one color, and I needed to separate some of the parts. At least when you're looking at it, your eyes will tell that there is a difference between materials on the base of this thing. I also painted black behind where the fan was going to go, and then I started to make it all messed up. I used ROXY Flesh Shade and I literally just painted streaks where I thought streaks would be. I also took a load of other paints and sort of splattered them on it, namely using some panel line wash. I also splattered some panel line wash all over the place, like I was just a little bit crazy. But don't worry, it looks good. It actually surprised myself that it came out this good. I'm not gonna lie, it actually looks really old and weathered, and I'm very happy about that. I also very strategically put some of that wash in some of the areas that I needed to add some more depth, because that is what this wash is really good for. I then, once that was all dried, glued this to the bottom of the base. And now that the base is one total unit, it's time for me to add some of the aging effects that I needed to add to the rest of the building, and that is by using this dirty down moss stuff. And I sprayed that strategically in places where I felt like water buildup might cause some moss to grow. I also glued in the smoky things, and then I decided it was time to work on the signage. But all I did was give it a dry brush and left it alone, because I then added some more little details on the base, like the handles of all the taps. So I started to paint the white as the underneath of the glow from the neon in the signs, and I realized I had painted way too much white. And let me show you why. That is because even after cutting back with some darker colors inside, you can still tell this doesn't look quite right. It looks okay, but it's not acceptable for me. So I'm going to paint that all back to black again and start again. But before I do that, I need to get these dudes to have their primer layer on. And that's going to be my actual next step. And as I've said in many a video, my choice for primer is this Chaos Black from Citadel. That is because I keep it in stock somewhere in my shop. Mainly because I also stock Warhammer-y things in my shop. And this is a very, very good paint for me. I like this paint. I genuinely, I actually like this paint, and I don't care if anyone doesn't. It's expensive, it costs a lot, and you chew through it like it's nothing. So Annoyingly, it cost me more than it should, but it works really well, and I have it in stock. I'm not about to go looking for a new supplier anytime soon. There are many other options. You don't have to use this one. This is just the one that I choose to use. Now that I've left everything to dry, all that is left for me to do is figure out another color of green to paint yet another frog. But first I need to assemble him so that I can give it a zenithal, which is going to give me the direction of my lighting and make my job a lot easier when I paint these parts all separately. I feel like I don't really need to explain a zenithal anymore at this point, but I will just roughly explain it for those who are new and perhaps this is your first video of mine that you're seeing. Basically, I'm spraying white over the top of black in order to create some form of artificial lighting. You can do this in one direction or you can do this all over the place, and sometimes that would then mean that it is a volumetric lighting. Don't worry about it, it gets too technical. If you just want to create a little bit more lighting underneath all the colors that you're going to put on top of the piece, or even just give yourself a good direction to go in, then just give it a zenithal highlight. I have waffled a lot over some of the painting that I've been doing, and getting on to painting the skins, this is an important topic for me to discuss, because in all the other models I have tried my best to change how I've done the skin tones, and yet again, being another model, I'm going to change it all over again, and this time I'm going to use that dirty down moss as the shadows over the top of the lighter green that I've originally put down. I'm going to mention this right now though, this model stayed sticky the entire time, and if I did not give it a clear coat afterwards, it would definitely be still sticky and probably this paint would come off. So use that at your discretion, but I pretty much painted all of it into the shadowed areas because it is a really nice deep green that has got a lot of saturation to it, and it helped sell the effects of skin exactly how I wanted. Now on this model there is a lot of little greeblies that go on his head and also on his belt. He has a lot of technical gadgetry, and so most of the stuff was pretty much just a black base coat with a lovely dry brush of metallic color over the top, and using a panel line wash I can then pick out some areas and make them just a little bit darker, and this helps to make this effect look even more effective. Now I'll come back to these parts a little bit later, but because I have ADHD or something else wrong with me, basically I need to change what I'm doing before I get bored, and so to change things up I'm going to start painting the bandages across these frogs' legs, and basically that just starts out with a grey, and once I'm done with that I'm going to then paint a Sagor brown all over the knee pads, because this is the base color that I'm going to use before I then dry brush or airbrush or whatever it is brush over the top of it in order to create a little bit more highlights on top of this lovely brown. The reason I use this particular brown is just because the coverage is so good, and the consistency of this paint means that it is super easy to paint without going outside the lines. I don't really know how to explain it, but the paint is just very nice to use if you need to paint brown. You may also notice that I painted a little bit of deck tan over one of the bandages on the arm, and that is because that is one of the colored things that hang on these models. There is specific little colored things, I don't know if you know this, but the Ninja Turtles have got different colors on each of them, and that is so that you can tell the difference between 4 little green men with backpacks on. Basically, they need to be painted different colors. That's what I was getting at, and in order to do that, I needed to lay that up with a deck tan so that when I came back and painted that later, it would nicely show up the color. In previous videos, I airbrushed the highlights onto the knee pads, and this time I wanted to just dry brush them just to see if this was possible to get the same kind of effect that I had in the previous models, just with an easier way for some people out there who may struggle with the airbrush. And as you can tell, using the same technique afterwards, by lining things up with a little bit of Agrax Earthshade, I got a pretty similar effect. And now in my opinion, this is not the same effect that I have from airbrushing it, but it still will sell on something like this. There is a lot of good textures on these knee pads and they stand out really, really well. Speaking of textures though, the easiest part about painting these models is the bandages, because all you need to do is use deck tan. Yes, that is right, deck tan. Take another drink, sir. You're going to be using a dry brush to dry brush the living daylights out of all of the legs. Also, I use Skeleton Horde, which is a contrast paint that is quite thin and dries very nice and matte over their toenails. It is the morning of day 4 or 3, I don't even know at this point, but it is a multiple day of the days of which I've started painting Donatello. However, I put these models together to get some pictures of the work in progress so that I could post in my Patreon, and I noticed that I was missing something. Luckily, I noticed it before I went home, and so I printed it. It is another little radio that goes on his belt, and I was wondering why there was a gap, and what possibly could have been put in that gap, until I realized that I had to print a thing that I was missing. But I guess this gives me a good segue to show you where we're at so far in the total diorama project of the Teenage Mutant Frog Turtle Ninjas. Also, I did mention that I was going to be giving away 2 of these sculpts, which was going to be Leonardo and Raphael. Those names are on the screen right now, and those are the people that won these sculpts. As I mentioned before, there is a lot of nefarious people upon the internet, and so thus if you don't contact me, then you don't get your prize. Basically, you got a prize. It's the file, STL file, for those Ninja Turtles. But also, speaking of which, you have not lost out, because I'm still going to be giving away the Donatello as well. Now, obviously, I'm going to have to announce that in the last video, which will be in 1 week's time from this video, which is the 30th of May, wherein with which you will also be announcing the winner of the GK2 as well. Now, I have waffled enough. It is time to get back into painting the rest of Donatello. The only annoying thing about putting things together for work in progress photos is that I have to take them apart again to continue painting. And as I take this model apart, I want to try and give you some sort of idea on the time scale of what we are dealing with right here. This is the start of day 3, which essentially is technically day 5, because 2 of those days were printing. But bear in mind that I use multiple printers to get this done, so that is a very short amount of time to print things with. I quickly want to touch on something that you may have missed in the background, and that was me adding a little bit of dirt, using that Skeleton Horde in my airbrush and just kind of roughly spraying it around areas in order to create a little bit of dirt on the bandages. And now, to create a highlight, I painted grey at first on those areas that are going to be purple, and then used white ink to spray a brighter area just in one spot. I'm then going to use Leviathan Purple, which is a contrast paint, and spray that as my base coat, and I felt like there was just not enough change between the brightness and the darkness on that purple, so I added a brighter purple over the top of that. I carefully also painted the in between his fingers, which I'm not going to lie was a little bit difficult, but it was easily done with a bit of patience. I then painted the pieces that were closer to his hand, and then came back with a black contrast paint, which is just easy to get out of the pot, and I painted that over all the middle sections of his weapon. I then came back to that a little bit later on with a dry brush, and I dry brushed some metallic paints over the top of it. As you can see, this is going to create some sort of metallic look to this weapon, and I felt like it would have been a little bit harder than just a piece of wood. I don't know. I actually have no idea what I'm doing most of the time, and it's surprising that many people still follow me. For example, I only figured out on the second turtle that I needed to paint grey back over the green, because this Skeleton Horde would not cover up the greens that I had originally laid down on the shells. And that's what I mean by I have no idea what I'm doing. I usually do something, figure out that it's wrong, and then do something to fix that something that was wrong. And when I'm done with fixing that it's wrong, I then post it on the internet and say, look at what I have done. And everybody rejoices in the fact that a thing was done. Speaking of a thing being done, I'm going to take some Gilliman flesh and I'm going to spray that in the crevasses on the shell on this dude. I'm not going to actually go too overboard, but I'm going to make his shell a little bit darker because his skin is a little bit brighter than the other guy's skins. I used Cygor Brown to paint all the straps, and again I used red leather to dry brush just over the top of them rather than airbrushing, just to prove that even a dry brush can do this. I then used that same red red leather to paint all the little stitches that hold some of the bits that are ripped and putting pieces together on his belt and around the areas of the belt. I also used the grey to paint those little straps that are on his belt and across his little chest strap as well. I took a nice bright silver that wasn't actually as bright as I thought it was going to be and painted the metallic pieces on the top of his back and also the little disc rings for him to attach things to. I then used some glue to glue in some of the tools around his belt. And now I used a brush this time to paint the Leviathan purple over the top of that strap on his shoulder. Again, it was too dark, so I used a brighter purple to wet blend into the top of that. I needed to also paint his mask, and in the same manner I painted it grey first and came back with deck tan to paint some highlighted areas in order to create a little bit more depth before I come back and put this purple in. Now, a lot of people are going to think that that step is not necessary because the purple is covering it up, but trust me, it is totally necessary, because even though you think it's covering it up, the darker color underneath definitely makes a difference. Even if it is small, a small difference is better than no difference. I used Sargor Brown again to paint the strap that goes across the top of his head and around the back of his head too, and I dry brushed that nice and easy with a smaller dry brush, which is actually in fact just a makeup brush from the cheap drugstore. I then took some nice little bit of red ink and I sprayed that very carefully on the top of his head, hoping not to make any mistakes, and painted blue onto what I think is the lenses of the thing on top of his head. I'm so tired, and I don't know if it's age, but every single time I change the pillowcase covers on my bed, I wake up with a sore neck, and I have a sore neck. But that's okay, because all that I really have left to do is his eyes, his teeth, and these little things that go around his belt, as well as the sign, although the sign... Day 4! This is day 4, and we're in the friggin' last stretch of getting this model done. It's a couple of little nitty gritty things that need to be done, and I can then sit back and be happy and rejoice in the work that I have put into making this model get completed. And now, what I want to just say about these models is the amount of details that's added. As we already know, this video and the previous videos of the Ninja Turtles was sponsored by Zed Studios, and these guys definitely don't compromise when it comes to the quality of the details on their models, and that is all the way down to textures as well as the little details that they have in the small things. For example, like these little radio things that go on the belt of Donatello. I'm going to use some edge highlighting tricks to make sure that these things stand out and you can see these awesome details that Zez has taken the time to put into the models. On the mouth of these Ninja Turtles, at first I was very upset that I had to see teeth again, because teeth are not fun to paint. You will know if you try to paint one of these just how fun teeth are to paint, but the teeth just really set the face up to really stand out because of that white against the nice bright greens as well as the purple and everything. To be totally honest though, the camera is not actually picking up the purple as to what I'm seeing with my own eyeballs. For some reason, the purple is a difficult color to show on cameras, and I can't actually really show you what the purple really looks like on this model. Another thing that is also really difficult to show painting on these models is their eyes, just because of how enclosed they are. These turtles have the most eyes are inside of their head, so it makes it difficult to film this as well as be able to see what I'm doing myself. The last thing that I need to do is paint this neon sign that is on the base, and to be totally honest, I made an entire video just on this particular painting over on my Patreon. So if you're interested in more behind the scenes and additional content, then go check it out in the link in my description. But for now, I'm calling this model done.
Kicking it back in the 90s, young, check the rhyme. My dad, a legend in the game all the time. Painting Zen Studios, bringing the heat. 3D print Ninja Turtles can't be beat. Skater vibes flowing, we're cruising the streets.
I seriously hope that you enjoyed this video, because my aim with all these videos is just something for you to watch that is enjoyable, but at the same time perhaps helps you in your endeavors in model painting and 3D printing or whatever it is with model making. At this point of the video, I always like to thank the sponsors as well as my Patreons, because without them I couldn't keep the lights on and blinding my eyeballs when I make videos. Also, this is the point of the video where I say to people, if you didn't like anything that you saw in this video, I genuinely don't care, and it's a good time for you to now kindly just cough.
Back in the 90s, young, check the rhyme. My dad, a legend in the game all the time. Pains and studios bringing the heat. 3D print Ninja Turtles can't be beat. Skater vibes flowing, we're cruising the streets, dropping bombs of color like no one competes. Tagging the walls with art spray can in hand. My dad's a superhero, yo, understand. Super 6 style, he's the master of disguise, creating masterpieces that open up your eyes. Z Studios, where the magic is born. With each stroke of the brush, a legend is formed.